Hey guys, so today we're going to be looking at the Vietnam War from its beginnings and sort of how it escalated to the point where America got involved in the conflict. So this is going to be a little bit of world history here for you, a little bit of background information. So Vietnam is part of a peninsula which used to be called French Indochina, and it was called that because it was not just Vietnam, it was also Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And as the French are there, as they colonize, and of course this is, something that colonizers normally did, is they restricted the rights of the local Vietnamese people. They instituted Catholicism as a new religion, basically saying Buddhism should not exist. So the upper classes were Catholic. They educated the upper classes of the Vietnamese culture. But as they are controlling the rights of the Vietnamese, there really is this harsh restriction. Now, during World War II, the French lose control of French Indochina, right? So you remember the French were basically captives of the Germans during World War II, and so that caused French Indochina to fall out of French hands for a short amount of time, and that is because of a guy named Ho Chi Minh. Now, Ho Chi Minh is actually a leader that is opposed to French rule. So essentially what this guy does is he's a communist, and he sees an opportunity when the French lose control of French Indochina. He sees this opportunity to lead this revolt. So he starts seeking for Vietnamese independence. So he founds the Indochinese Communist Party and gets together a group of supporters. And his supporters are a group known as the Viet Minh, right? So the Viet Minh are Ho Chi Minh's followers. And in 1945, at the end of World War II, they declared the northern part of Vietnam independent in the city of Hanoi, right? So Ho Chi Minh has successfully taken control of the north part of Vietnam. So this is where we are at the end of World War II, right? So at the end of World War II, after Ho Chi Minh has taken control, war's over, the French decide, you know what? I want to get my colony back, right? So the French go to the United States and ask Truman for support. Truman is like, yep, right on it. You guys are right here. You guys have the colony. We're going to let you take it. So this is a belief in the Domino Theory. The idea is that if one Southeast Asian country falls to communists, they're all going to fall. So you think about like dominoes that you line up and you push over, right? So Northern Vietnam has fallen to communism. So we're going to make sure that they don't remain that way, so that South Vietnam won't fall, so that Cambodia won't fall, Thailand, Laos. We want to prevent all of those countries from falling. So that is why we help support the French, right? Unfortunately, the French fail to retake Vietnam and are forced to surrender. They do one last-ditch effort at Dien Bien Phu. So they parachute in. They've got this massive army, but the Viet Minh take over, force them out, and the French are booted out of North Vietnam. So at the end of World War II, we signed a document called the Geneva Accords. So in 1954, France, Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States, China, Laos, and Cambodia all meet with the Viet Minh for peace talks. They're basically saying hey, we get that you're communist and that's fine, but we want to make sure that South Vietnam doesn't remain communist. So they decide to divide Vietnam on the 17th parallel. This should start sounding familiar to you guys. Then in 1956, they are going to hold an election between the communist North and the nationalism or anti-communist government in the South, right? So the idea is that you got 2 years, we'll give it a try, right? North Vietnam is going to stay communist, South Vietnam is going to stay democratic. After 2 years, we'll see which one you like better, and we'll take this massive vote. The idea being, America's obviously you're going to like democracy better because democracy is so much better, right? So the idea is that obviously we're going to like democracy better, and the hope is that after the 1956 elections, they'll vote for democracy. So this is the dividing line here where they divide. So that is, again, along the 17th parallel. But again, this should sound familiar because this is basically what happened in Korea. So here's a problem. The leader of South Vietnam is a guy named Ngo Diem, Okay, so No Diem is the president of the South. He is who we support as the United States, right? The idea is that he is the democratic capitalist leader. The problem is No Diem is an upper-class Catholic. So he comes from that community of people who were educated by the French elite, right? Converted to Catholicism. And he is very anti-Buddhist. Well, the problem with that is almost all of Vietnam is Buddhist. So he basically institutes a persecution of Buddhism where there are secret police. He limits the rights of Buddhists. It gets so bad that Buddhist monks, in order to protest, will go into the middle of a crowded street and set themselves on fire, right? Think about how terrible that is. And that's this picture in the bottom right-hand corner that things are so bad, and I so want the whole world to see what I am willing to do to protest this government, right? And this is the guy we support. We still are going to support him because he's not a communist. And that's our big thing. We don't really care what else he does. As long as he's not a communist during the Cold War, we're good, right? So this is a major, major problem, right? So No Diem, continues No Diem, as he remains leader, Ho Chi Minh starts to seem like the better option for both the North and the South. And it seems pretty obvious that if 1956 rolls around, everybody's going to vote for communism, not capitalism. So Diem is afraid that he's going to lose the 1956 elections. So he just refuses to participate. He's like, you know what? We're good. We're not going to vote. We're just going to stay like we are, right? Because he knows the South would have voted for Ho Chi Minh. Well, the South, of course, and Ho Chi Minh are not happy with this. So members of the South who decide to support Ho Chi Minh are called the Viet Cong, or the VC, you'll hear them called sometimes. And so this is a group of communists that are formed in the South. They're going to be fighting with the Viet Minh and with Ho Chi Minh, okay? The problem is this is not a unified army. They're not wearing, colors to recognize that I am a Southern Vietnamese person that supports No Diem or supports Ho Chi Minh. So you walk into a city, right? Think about, I look around a room of students and I can't tell just from looking at you what political party you are, right? Everybody has a different political party. So it's very difficult to tell apart the Viet Cong from allies. And that's going to cause a lot of major issues. It doesn't help that they use guerrilla tactics. So basically they don't fight lining up and shooting at each other. They're jumping out of the jungle, attacking, surprise attack, and then disappearing into the jungle. They know the jungle better than we do, right? So the South becomes incredibly unstable as a result of this. And the Viet Cong are, basically running the place. So in 1963, John F. Kennedy is assassinated. Kennedy had sent troops and money over to Vietnam, but when things look really bad, before Kennedy is assassinated, actually, the United States CIA supports a coup against No Diem, and he is assassinated by the CIA, right? The idea is, let's just get No Diem out of the picture, and then everybody will go back to the way things were, right? Everybody will be happy. They'll, support democracy, and it'll be great, right? Well, just a few weeks after FDR signs off on the assassination of No Diem, he's killed, and Lyndon Baines Johnson, his vice president, inherits the war. Johnson does not want to make the mistake of looking soft on communism. He wants to look tough. So he decides that the best way to do this is escalate our involvement in the conflict. But he wants to make sure the Americans support that escalation. We're not just going to say, let's go, because then it's just another Korea, right? We didn't really like the Korean War. We kind of tried to forget about it. So Johnson has to make sure that we have a really good reason for getting involved. That's where the Tonkin Gulf incident comes in. So word comes out in August of 1964 that North Vietnam has attacked a U.S. naval vessel in the Gulf of Tonkin. So if you look over here, this is just off the coast of North Vietnam. There is the ship, right? So he goes to Congress and says, hey, the North Vietnamese attacked us. We have to fight back, right? So this looks like, we got to send our men there. We got to protect America and protect our soldiers. So America gets on board with it. Congress passes what's called the Tonkin Gulf Resolution that says, LBJ, you can do whatever you want, all necessary action. We never declared war. This is not a UN conflict. They just say, LBJ, just do it. Just whatever you need to do it. War is never declared. This is called a blank check. So imagine like your grandmother sends you a check for your birthday and forgot to fill in the number, right? She signed it, but forgot to put the number in. Basically, you can write in whatever number you want, right? If you're nice, you might only put like $10, $15. If you're not so nice and you don't love your grandma, you might put in like $100 or $1,000, right? Well, basically what the United States says, however much money you need, however many troops you need, all of it, just send it to Vietnam, right? So the problem with this is later, a bunch of papers came out called the Pentagon Papers. And a lot of those papers says the Tonkin Gulf incident may not have even happened. It's possible that Congress made it up in order to justify us getting involved in the war. Maybe something happened, like there was a training accident that went wrong, or they were fireworks or something, and they sort of exaggerated it. But it's also possible that it's completely fabricated, completely made up to get us involved in the war. That's a little sketch, right? And it really was. So just the names of the people who are going to be involved under LBJ's time in the war. So obviously we do have Lyndon Johnson, LBJ. So he escalates the U.S. involvement. He unleashes what's called Operation Rolling Thunder, which is the bombing of North Vietnam, and it sends initially over 300,000 troops, and eventually even more troops than that will be sent during his time in office. Then we have a guy named Robert McNamara. He is the Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, so he's advising LBJ. Then we have a guy named Dean Rusk. Dean Rusk is the Secretary of State, so also very influential in the political side of the war. And then finally, we have a guy named General Westmoreland. So Westmoreland is the general of the U.S. troops. He would go on to basically regret being involved in the war at all. So these are the major people that you need to know. We'll get more into the war itself and sort of what happens in the next video. But for now, this should give you a good introduction to the Vietnam War. Hope you learned something. Bye.